Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is season 6, episode 5. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. This is an interview I've been really looking forward to sharing. It's one that really hit me hard as we were talking, and for several weeks since. Jennifer has been reflecting on her life and the effect misophonia has had on her own life and her relationships with others, going back decades to when she was a little girl who was best friends with her parents. But that changed suddenly and just never recovered. This story was just really surreal and emotional for me to listen to because, as I know many of you know and understand and can relate, I've gone through a lot of the same situations, feelings, what-ifs, growing up, and especially now looking back in my 40s. I'd love to hear what you think. You can reach out to me always by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or hit me up on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. And sometimes I'm on Twitter too at Misophonia Show. I just want to, before we get started, thank my Patreon supporters. And if you feel like contributing, you can read all about the different levels at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. Please, share any episode too. This helps get the word out. Leave a quick review. This would be a great one to share. Here's my conversation with Jennifer. Jennifer, great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So you said you have not heard too many, but I usually like to just kind of ask around kind of where people are and what they do to kind of set the baseline.
Yeah, so I go in like spurts of like delving into the misophonia world, and then I kind of take a break. And so I guess I came across you on one of those like deep dive moments. Yeah, and I listened to an episode, and I heard how it was very casual, and how it's just an opportunity to tell the story, everybody's story, which I think has a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. So I just thought it would be interesting to share my experience and possibly help others that may have had a similar experience.
Yeah, I know you're right. We share a lot of common experiences. Yeah, every time somebody comes on, new people relate. So it's definitely gonna help a lot of people. So maybe tell us about you sounds like you kind of went through a recent deep dive. Did anything kind of instigate that?
So I think like many people's stories, because of the internet, they discovered this term that applied to them, and they had no idea there was such a term. And that's been unfolding for me for maybe like 5 years. And I'm 48 years old now. And this started when I was 10. So you could say the last 5 years have definitely been like a rebirth, because I never knew this term. And when I first found out about it, I think, the normal reaction is like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you quickly find that nothing is really going to change much just because you learned the term. Yeah. And so that's where I've been in the last 5 years. Like, oh, wow, this is really great, and breakthroughs. And then like, oh, well, there's still really nothing to be done about it.
Yeah, we're all still talking about the same stuff. Pretty much.
Yeah. But as far as what's happened, as far as like my perspective on my whole life has changed like dramatically. And so I think, I'm like probably like going through a midlife crisis. So it's all like very timely, like that. I'm just kind of taking stock of a lot of things in my life. And I have a grown daughter. She's 23 now. And so I think a lot of my this new chapter of my life has it coincided with all this misophonia research. And so I think it's like a very timely thing that like I've been going through this major life change at the same time of discovering all these things. And so I've been having like just a lot of epiphanies, basically.
I without getting into, I'm sure I'll tell my story at some point on the show, but I'm about your age, and you're right. I'm in the past couple of years, maybe because of the pandemic, I've been kind of, and because of things that have happened with people, passing away, just been kind of thinking back to all the way back to like early years and kind of
Yeah.
how a lot of things have kind of where maybe misophonia has weaved in and out and how it's affected its repercussions, going back maybe even obviously my childhood, but also maybe even other people's pasts and how this thing kind of tends to reverberate. Anyways, that's kind of vague, but yeah, it's led a lot of people to kind of look back and kind of rethink things, and interesting that some of the therapies I hear about these days have to do with connecting with your like your child,
Mm,
the child that was maybe um whether it was trauma or something that may have happened around the time when you were growing up.
yeah.
One of the therapies is kind of trying to reconnect with that and kind of maybe bridge the gap or close a loop that was never closed. Anyways, I digress, but yeah, this is gonna, yeah, definitely a lot of people are gonna relate. So
Yeah.
let's maybe, do you want to go back to kind of around age 10, Jennifer, and
Mhm.
paint a picture there a little bit about what was maybe going on?
Yeah. So, um, the
Start
interesting,
anywhere. I don't need to. You don't need to sum it up in
yeah,
10 seconds, but like,
yeah. Um, like I said, that my perspective has changed a lot, in the last 5 years. But one thing that I've always known and that I never ever could talk about before I learned about misophonia was I remember the day, the moment that it really got like switched on. And I, I the incredible thing is I have a photograph of the day. Uh,
wow.
yeah. And it was because I was 10 years old and it was my mother's birthday. And my parents used to fight a lot. They got married very young. They were like 19 and 20 years old. And so I was 10 years old and they used to fight a lot. And in my memory, they were in a fight. And my father took us to the local Carvel. It's in here in New Jersey. It's a ice cream place, old school ice cream place. Get ice cream cakes, and he took us to get an ice cream cake for her birthday. And I remember like wanting to jump out of my skin in the car.
Mm,
Being in the car with my father, his mouth noises, his just putting his fingers in his mouth, and couldn't look at his hands on the steering wheel. And I remember like our house was very tense that night because my parents were fighting. And when we came back, I was covering my ears. And that's when it became like a big deal in my family. Like, why are you covering your ears? What's going on? Like, and we took a picture with my mother around the cake. And I had my two fingers in my ears, like, not even like I was a little kid. I wasn't even trying to hide it or anything. I was just like, there's something irritating me. So my reaction
yeah.
was to plug my ears. And every photograph after then was that, we had to take as a family with my father nearby. I would just plug my ears. And there's, those were pretty much like the only times we took pictures was like, the family
Yeah.
birthdays and everything. And from that moment forward, you like up until I was a teenager, you just see me looking absolutely miserable. And then like I developed a more more subtle way of covering my ears. Like I would like, rest my hand on like my elbow on the table and like lean into my hand
Yeah.
so I could cover my ear. And like all these like when I was a little kid, I didn't know to do that. I just would just stick two fingers in my ears and like,
Right.
and I remember that my entire life was Jennifer, get your fingers out of your ears. Like, why are you covering your ears? And it was just like a constant scolding. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask what the reaction was, and it seems like, yeah, there was no empathy about that. It was, did they ever ask, like, or
Oh
how
yeah,
did you
it
try
was
to
the
explain it, or?
hugest deal. No, like I had no idea what was going on.
Mhm.
So, like I said, like looking back and having this different perspective, I mean, I think, before hearing about this, I pretty much always felt like something was wrong with me. Like I'm a weirdo. I don't know
Yeah.
why I'm acting like this. And, um, uh, and like I'm a seeker. So when I became a teenager and into my adult life, I had done so much searching as to why I acted like this, specifically around my father. And I mean, I went to so many psychologists and therapists and different kinds of healers, all kinds of alternative therapies. And I always talked about issues with my father in like a psychological way.
Mm-hmm.
Like you talk about if I know the jury's out if misophonia is from trauma or not, but and before I knew that it was misophonia, why I was acting this way, I guess I kind of uh, delved into that my reaction to my father was because of trauma, and so I always was trying to uncover that, and I mean I did so much work around that, and in a logical, like, psychological way, I can see like my father was traumatizing, but he was also like very nurturing and very loving and very giving, and like I knew these two sides of my father existed, and I
It could have been
couldn't.
hard for it could have been harder for sorry to cut in, but
Yeah,
I'm just brainstorming because yeah, to me this the whole trauma aspect of misophonia is actually relatively new. It's interesting that you were seeking that at kind of such a young age, but maybe it's just a child not being able to reconcile those two sides and seeing that contrast.
yeah.
I don't know.
So what happened when when I became an adult, and like I said, and like going through all of this, like reconciling of late, I had forgotten that previous before I was 10 years old, my father was my absolute favorite person. And I had made him my enemy my entire life, so much so that I'd completely forgotten that. And like anybody that my aunts and uncles, anybody that knew us then would have said the same thing. Like I had just forgotten, but my father and I were like two peas in a pod. Like we did everything together. If it was my mother and my brother and me and my father. And if like we went anywhere as a family and we had to like split up, it was like, I'm going with dad, like he was my
Yeah,
absolute favorite person. And, um, when this all started, I mean, he became toxic to me. I mean, it was just like, I had to leave the room. And so, like I know that had the hugest impact on him, like devastating, life changing, and
yeah.
um, yeah, and but like I put that out of my mind for so many decades that how close we were. I just like I couldn't even go there, and learning about the misophonia, and like I said, taking stock of my life, I remembered it, and really just kind of hitting me like the loss, how much of a loss it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think a lot of us can relate, and I mean, I personally can relate with something very similar to that too. So that's yeah, that's very it's very interesting to have that hit in recent years. I can kind of understand that. Is your dad still with us or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And so it's like and they live close, and I've never, you can't say I've had a relationship with my family at all. Like we're always in contact, but it's very minimal. My dad, he's always, you know, helped around the house, something breaks, he comes to fix it, that kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. But
But
it's a stark contrast to the first 10 years, right? I
right.
mean,
Like I
yeah,
wonder, like, I mean, trust me, my family has other issues. It's not just this is definitely the biggest, but like I don't even know what our relationship would have been like if it weren't for this.
yeah.
And because, I do know that we definitely, like have our issues, but outside of this, but like when I just hear like you see on social media like somebody like a picture with their dad, or like, oh, my one friend, she goes to a brewery all the time with her dad and has a drink, and I'm like, my dad would kill for an experience like that, and like it seems like such a normal thing that people can do, and I've never been able to. And
So you know that he would. So he is. Do you feel like he's still thinking about that little girl? Like he's like
yeah,
he. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, it my dad is very he's forgiving, and he's not a mushy, like, emotional person. So,
Yeah.
like, he hides it all. But
Yeah. Yeah.
oh yeah, it's definitely come up. So when I
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, when I found out about this years ago, because I don't have this, like, normal, you know, even, like, ability to, like, communicate with my parents or even be in the same room with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, the first person I told was my daughter, who I guess she was only like 18 at the time, if I'm saying 5 years ago. But my daughter's applying to med school right now. She's very intelligent. She's always been very mature, and she also studied neuroscience as an undergrad.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so she can understand all this stuff. So when I told her about it, and she was like, wow, like, everything makes so much sense. And we even had to go and have a conversation about, like, how she was raised because of it. um
Yeah, that's gonna be my next kind of. Well,
yeah.
there's enough I want to talk about with your dad,
Yeah.
but yeah, very curious kind of how her experience was.
So luckily she did not trigger me the way they did.
Okay,
I
that's great.
probably had irritating moments that were because of it, but it was nothing as profound as with them.
Hmm. Hmm.
But because of how I am with them, it was very awkward with her as a child. Like, how, my
Oh
parents
yeah.
watched her. Yeah, like, I would bring her to their house, and I would have to, like, stand outside and, like, kind of, like, put the baby inside and, like, step back, and, like, all kinds of weird behaviors that she did not understand. And then at 18 years old, when I could tell her, she was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. She was very understanding, and she didn't think it was weird at all, because she's just very accepting of these things. And but
Yeah.
she did say that, like, because of the tension, and how much she loves her grandparents. And the tension wasn't just tension, it was, me being triggered constantly, and them being mad at me, basically. And so it would just seem like, for a kid not knowing, for anybody
Yeah.
not knowing what's going on, it just looks like two people that, like, are, like, explosive around each other, and, like, nobody can see why.
Right. How did you react? So I'm gonna probably go into all different directions, jumping
Yeah.
around because but yeah, how did you react as an adult when you were being triggered versus as the girl? I'm just curious.
I think I learned very early on.
Because you probably knew what the name was at this point. I'm curious if you
Oh
reacted
no,
differently or no.
not
No.
most of my adult years. No, I was in my 40s when I learned.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so raising my daughter, I had my daughter when I was 24, and raising her, I still acted like the teenager with misophonia.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, um, just, I didn't even think about earplugs and things like that until I, joined misophonia groups on Facebook. And the last couple of days, well, it's been weird since the pandemic, so there's not really been the same kind of
Yeah.
the things that we have done. I have my arsenal of earplugs, and I mean, those are awful because you can't hear anything.
Right.
So I go, and I'm not getting triggered. I'm much more comfortable in that way. But I sit there, like, basically in, like, a cloud of my own. And
Zombie. Yeah.
yeah, my daughter she knows I have the earplugs in, and, like, she'll, like, kick me under the table if somebody's talking to me and I don't hear them. So yeah, like, yeah. So she's my ally and all that.
Okay, well, that's great that you have
Yeah,
someone so close who's your ally and is going to be doing neuroscience, and will discover the cure
yeah,
for us, and then
that's
we'll
what
save
we all
ourselves.
say. Yeah.
I mean, slight tangent. I'll probably cut this part up, but actually, the last two people I interviewed this past week were both college young women who are in college to do neuroscience specifically for misophonia.
Wow.
So there's some things in the air where people smart women are getting
Yeah.
together and oh, wow,
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways, back to
Yeah.
back to you though. Okay, so Okay, yes, your daughter has been kind of your ally. And so I guess, yeah, how did you, was it really just through Googling in the last 5 years that you discovered that it had a name? Was there a moment that you kind of hit a tipping point? And do you remember the Google search that you entered?
So it came upon slowly. Maybe even more than 5 years ago, I heard
Mhm.
on like NPR um, an interview with the woman who's a doctor in Oregon. That was like one of
Oh,
the
yeah,
yeah.
Marsha Johnson. Yeah, I interviewed
Okay.
her. She's great. I've met her.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I heard that in passing on NPR and like my jaw dropped. And I guess I don't know, I'm the kind of person like, um, you know, these like groundbreaking things can happen. And then I'm just like, I don't know, maybe I'm like a realist. And I was just like, you know, I, I was like, I'm not going to put too much,
Yeah.
stock into that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I'm going to go to Oregon and see this woman. And then like, all right, be realistic. Like, I
Right.
went back and forth. And so I kind of let it sit for a while. And then I don't know what made me think of this, but the big breakthrough 5 years ago was thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder if there's anything on Facebook. Because up until then, I just like
Oh,
heard,
there's definitely stuff on Facebook.
right, no, huge, I know. And well, but the difference is before then,
Almost too
I was
much, but yeah.
totally, the difference is before then, I was reading articles and it was like one sided. And
Yeah.
then when I was like, let me see if anything's on Facebook and I found these groups, that's when it was like, really more integrated into my life because um yeah, before then it was just experts saying what it was like, and now it was like, oh my gosh, there's these like, everyday people living the same way. And I introduced myself on the Facebook group by showing the pictures, and I didn't look too much into like what the group was about or anything. I just posted these pictures and introduced myself, and the response was overwhelming.
Yeah.
uh, and then I was like, okay, wow, this is my world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how, yeah, probably a lot of people have similar pictures or memories of, that
Right.
were not
Right.
captured quite like that.
That's what they were saying, was it was like, just so if theirs could have been captured, that's what it would have looked like. Yeah.
I'm sure at least 20% of my interviews have to do with somebody trapped in a car and wanting to get out.
So
And
do you want to hear the car story
oh
that
yeah,
of
please,
life?
please.
We had like I was a kid of the 70s, and we had the old station wagon with like wood paneling on the
Oh
side.
yeah.
And yeah, we'd always go on road trips and go down the shore. And um my so yeah, being trapped in the car was brutal. And without even knowing, why I was doing it, I started just sinking my teeth into the car door, like the leather underneath the window, like on the
Wow.
car
Yeah.
door.
Oh yeah.
And I would just put all my rage into just fighting that. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what was going on with me. And my brother would be in the back seat with me, like what the hell is she doing? And before long, I had completely destroyed the car door. And my family is very good with denial. They're just like, why did you do that? And I don't know what I had said to it, but it was just ignored. And I remember all the kids on the block, my dad would like take us to 7-Eleven for Slurpees. And
Oh God. Yeah.
all the kids like piled into the car, and they're like, what the hell happened to the car door? And my brother, without like missing a beat, was like, the dog chewed it up. And like, I that's another thing that I had just completely forgotten ever happened, but that came back to me in the
Yeah.
last 5 years. Yeah. And I was like, wow, like, now that I've been a parent, I'm like, how would I react if my daughter was doing something so destructive? And like, I can't blame my parents. They're like parents of their time. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
resources. They didn't, but, um, you know, since, since finding out about this, and I had my daughter tell them that I discovered
Okay, so she was the
yeah,
messenger to your
she was the
parents.
messenger. And it was, yeah, it was because, it was on my birthday, and they were asking to go out to dinner. And I had, many times in the past decades suffered through meals,
Oh
just,
yeah.
yeah. So, this birthday, I was like, you know what? I can't do it. And I want to just come clean and say why. So I had my daughter tell them. And my daughter told me my mother cried. And um, and my dad said, he always figured, my dad, I
Hmm.
hope this isn't, my dad's not the most politically correct. And I don't know if he's right or wrong, but he said, yeah, I always figured she was autistic or something.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and neither of them ever said anything to me. I think I got a text from my mom that said, if you want us to buy earplugs or anything, let me know.
Okay.
Because,
Yeah.
yeah, they're not,
For the
they're
dinner or just as a medical gesture or something?
that's all they know how to do is like, do you
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
money for something?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So, there was never any, conversation about it. And I still wonder, like, if they are feeling guilt for like screaming at me my whole life instead of saying, hey, maybe you don't want to be acting this way. So,
So this is the only interaction that you know that they were that this came in discussion, like that you're on that birthday, your
well,
daughter went to them, or
that is the only conversation. And then since then, every time I came, or, in the months following that, every time I came upon a really like fitting article that like I
yeah.
felt really explained, someone else's story that was so much like mine, so that my goal was my parents seeing that like this is the condition, it's not me. I kept sending her articles like that. I wouldn't really get much of a response back, or she'd say something like, yeah, I know, I've read some things, like
Right. Right.
nothing. And like, and then I realized that as an adult too, like my mother is not going to give me what I need ever. So uh
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not shocked.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, maybe that, oh, yeah, I mean, I'm not a therapist, but maybe, yeah, it goes back to some of the things I've been hearing, therapies I've been hearing about recently about needing to kind of like you talking to your child's self as a way to kind of like give it the
uh,
comfort that it didn't have,
um,
maybe from the people who are around you back then. What about your brother? Where is he in all this?
so my brother and I've never had a close relationship. I don't even
Mm,
think before this.
hmm.
I think it was one of those cases. He's 2 years older than me. Probably one of those cases where he was traumatized by my birth. Like
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like that's very much
Yeah.
the way our family dynamics are. Like I said, even before this, it was him and my mom and me and my father. And you
Yeah.
know, yeah. And so he's mama's boy. And the fact that I caused these problems in the family, I think, made my brother hate me even more. Like
Oh, okay.
he's
So
not a protective brother. Yeah.
you don't really talk to him that much, more just family events,
No.
or
And
okay.
no, and I don't even know if my mother would have told him, like, hey, this
Ah,
discovery,
oh,
like,
hey, this major thing to your the right that potentially explains your siblings' entire
right,
life. Okay.
right. And and I think like in many families, there's the black sheep, or like the scapegoat, and like I said, there's a lot of dysfunction anyway. And I think my problems made it like everybody could just blame me. They don't have to look at anything that's wrong with them or anything
Mm,
else that's going
yeah.
on. So I don't think my mother wants, like, I don't think she could possibly face the fact that there's something that's not my fault. Like she's been so used to blaming me, for everything, that
Yeah.
I don't think she could switch that narrative.
Right. Yeah. It's a kind of a sunk cost. Like it's like if you try to question it, it's like as if you're accepting that you were wrong for like 40 years.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
that's almost like you have to double down if you're that kind of person.
exactly.
um
I think, and my mother and my brother are definitely like that, and my father is probably like, the impact is huge. Like, so I don't blame anybody for that either. it's incredibly sad. So
Yeah,
like,
that
oh, I just
yes.
can't go there.
Yeah. Oh man, that's what about other like other family members like uncles and cousins? Does anyone know what's going on? Do you talk to them at all
So
maybe? Or
not to be too depressing, but
yeah,
yeah,
bring it on. We're already there.
yeah. Um, my one family member that I was closest with was my aunt, my father's
Yeah.
sister, and yeah, you can see where this is going. She's no longer with us,
Right, right.
but she also had a lot of problems, and she was also very she was a seeker, and she was very self-sufficient and smart, and she researched her own conditions, and I don't know exactly what her diagnosis was, but she had been on medication her whole life, and she did end up committing suicide. And the way everybody in the family reacted to her death also was very telling, because I always saw her as someone that was very brave and very smart and caring, and she was the best family member as far as um, being caring about everybody else.
Yeah.
And when she died, they were basically like, well, she was always messed up.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
very old school.
Yes.
Yeah, just calling somebody messed up, right? I mean, that's something
Exactly.
I've probably even said back in the day, but
Right.
it's
Right. Before we knew better and everything.
right.
So like, yeah. And I'm like, wow, like I see them all as assholes, and she was like the best. Like she
Hmm.
really, when we did get together, it was because of her. Like nobody gets together anymore,
Hmm.
So so I wish to God, if she were here, like, God, she's the only person I would be able to share this with, and be able to have any kind of, she could probably be extremely helpful to me. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so the other ones basically are not worth explaining it to.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Understood. Yeah. It sounds like it's funny how yes, people like that can kind of really, really stand out to people like us maybe.
Yeah,
They really stand out, and yeah, that's it's really sad when things turn.
yeah.
Was she? I don't know why the term HSP came to my mind because a lot of people have m- uh, come on saying that they're HSP mean highly sensitive person, like are
Oh,
extra able to kind of like read the room or get a feel what other people are kind of feeling. She sounds like maybe she's had that kind of like I don't know gift, or maybe
yeah,
just seem like that in the face of complete the rest of your family being so
yeah.
numb. Um,
She's definitely I mean, she was very intuitive and very smart, yes.
Yeah.
But
She didn't have misophonia, or do you know if
I
she
don't.
had
Well,
anything?
that's what, like, I would have loved to talk to her
Yeah.
about, because
Yeah. Yeah.
she had OCD very bad, and
Mm.
I had episodes with it myself. And when I did, it was the same reaction. It was like, you better get help. What's wrong with you? You're making everybody miserable.
Mm.
And she would give me books on it. She gave me a book. I'll never forget. She gave me a book, and she put a different cover on it, she just put like a generic like novel like cover on it, because she was like, this is your journey. Like nobody has to know.
Oh,
Yeah, so she covered the book, but it was a
that's
book about,
cool.
yeah. She's like, so, because she knew like the flack that she got.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And and it was a book about retraining your brain, and like, as hard as that is to do, I've always, that stayed with me, that, like, like, you can, like, mind over matter certain things.
Yeah.
Definitely I understand that obviously I still have misophonia and I still have OCD to a certain point, but I did see how, your brain could dig these very deep trenches, if and you can kind of smooth over those trenches by, like, breaking patterns. And
Your brain is plastic. I mean, that's yeah,
yeah,
that's hard neuroscience right there. So it's
yeah,
yeah, there are ways to do that if you
yeah,
can find it. Misophonia is very understudied, so I think we're starting to get there. But
yeah.
yeah,
I would
it's
say, like, I've only ever attempted anything with OCD, and it has helped. Like, I still kind of always have it, but I think I could definitely go really off the deep end if I didn't, kind of always have these practices of, not letting myself, get too carried away with it. And misophonia, I don't think that's possible, or I don't know those tools for it.
Yeah, interesting. What are some of the things that a couple of maybe some of the exercises that you do for OCD? Are they kind of talk there, like talking to yourself kind of therapy, like things to
Yeah,
think
like
about, or
breathing exercises,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I know
yeah,
people say for these fun, but also like I think everybody's different what they have to do, and I don't want to trigger anybody or but like for instance with me, if I feel like I have to wash my hands, like
yeah.
maybe I don't have to wash my hands with boiling hot water and antibacterial soap. Maybe just
Mm,
regular soap and like regular water is fine. And that way I don't, because if I do the hot water and the antibacterial soap, then I'll like need to do something else after it or, like,
yeah,
so I tell myself, okay, that's good enough. Like you're
gotcha,
clean.
gotcha.
Yeah.
And you said like this that kind of talk doesn't really work for misophonia, or yeah, maybe you haven't tried anything.
Yeah. It's too, maybe the fact that misophonia is in response to people and you don't have that like private space to like to work things out like with OCD if I'm alone
Oh
I
yeah, it's a good point.
yeah
Yeah,
like you're the anxiety level because you're there in front of
you're
somebody.
right in front of somebody. Yeah, and you don't have much time to react.
No.
Yeah, because yeah, interesting. Okay. Yeah, needs probably needs a whole new set of tools, or you need to go into a situation already kind of prepped.
Mm,
Is what I kind of I never remember, but because things happen all of a sudden, and I think we try to block out our triggers until they happen. But I try to tell I try to tell people that you maybe before a meal, like tell yourself that it's only 20-30 minutes, then you can go take a walk or something afterwards. So just sometimes being able to tell your body that
yeah.
can kind of like dull it down a little bit, just knowing that you have an escape. But I don't know. Like I said, I rarely remember
Yeah.
to do that because it's you get caught up because when you're around people, yeah, you get caught up in whatever's happening. And if you're even there in the first place, you could be standing outside like you were at your
Yeah.
at
Well, I
your family's
remember
house.
even before I knew that this was misophonia, I would give myself that talk before I would go into my parents' house, for
Hmm.
example. Like I would say, like when I used to think it was because of trauma and psychological reasons, I would tell myself, like, my dad's not hurting me, nothing bad, like he's a good person.
Yeah,
And then I would go in and get triggered in a second. And I'd be like,
yeah.
damn, like
It's funny because it's true. Sorry,
yeah.
but yeah, I think we've all tried stuff like that. How did you? I'm curious. Like, you said you're a seeker, and it seems like you've made some epiphanies like long before. Like, I mean, I feel like I've been in the community for a while, and I've just thought of some like realized some of these things, like the potential trauma influence. What were some of the like, how did you find out about some of that stuff? I'm assuming some of that maybe thinking had come from before you knew it had a name, or
Well, I guess the
just
Facebook
trying to
group.
figure yourself out. Okay, it's from the
Yeah,
so it is from the Facebook group. Okay,
yeah,
maybe I just missed those posts
yeah.
back in the day. Okay,
And
gotcha.
yeah, like and there was like one I guess the thing that got me up to speed the most is I think there's a Facebook page called like Misophonia Treatment Tracker, Treatment and Symptoms Tracker or something.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And a lot of people listening will probably know this person. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. I think his first name's Michael. He posts on there very openly. He's probably done like every therapy out there and he documents it all. Like
Ah,
amazing. And I remember spending days like reading all of his stuff. And he's worked with like so many people and like the big names that are out there that say that they're using all these different approaches. And I just basically read like his whole experience, and I was like, okay, I believe all that, and I believe that would have been my same experience. Like I would have like worked really, really, really hard, and maybe had a little bit of progress, and then like really no major like breakthrough. So I feel like I got it all in a nutshell. Like what's
Yeah, because that
available.
sounds like some of those treatments I've heard of are very expensive too. But
Right. Exactly.
it's good to have us somebody maybe sum that up for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There isn't really obviously, as you know, there isn't really
And
um, a bullet, a silver bullet.
although I will say what has been interesting to me, I'm awful with names, and I know, like I said, a lot of people listening probably know who I'm talking about. There's the chiropractor, but I guess he calls himself like a neurological chiropractor out in like Utah, I think.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I've seen him speak at a convention, but yeah, I also don't remember his name.
yeah, but I read a lot of there was this one woman that documented her daughter's story, and I believe that something like that could work for young kids if it like is nipped in the bud, like how uh if when I was like 10 or 12 years old and this was just developing, if I
Hmm.
got put into a therapy like that, I think that could have been effective. Where, like you said, their brains are plastic, and that plastic gets hardened the older you get, and so
Yeah, mine's rock hard. It's not going anywhere.
yes, yes, decades of being like this, I think would be much harder. But I do think it's hopeful for little kids, and for that reason, I was like, going through all this and the despair and everything.
Mm.
I would talk to some people's parents who I saw posting where they're just like trying to understand what their kids going through, and so um, I would take time to maybe like respond to those people or message those people to be like, your kid doesn't actually hate you, or like,
Yeah,
because I know what my father could have been like helped by hearing, and so yeah, I think those kids might have the best chance of
a
getting
treatment.
some
That's different
breakthrough.
treatment like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said yeah, I want to talk about like how it's affected like social life and whatnot, but I do want to talk yeah, maybe talk about a little bit about or see if wait, I think you said that when you thought it had more to do with trauma, does that mean your thinking has kind of changed maybe as you've done some of this thinking back? Is it do you feel like it's kind of you maybe no longer think it's as much about trauma and it's maybe more biological? I'm just curious kind of
Yeah.
what your state of
So
mind is now.
I my the jury's out with me on the trauma. I
Hmm.
I could completely see how it could be in my case, and then I could also see like I think I had a very like an extreme childhood. It was like extremely normal and then extremely dysfunctional. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it wasn't like the worst, it was episodes, of violence and craziness. And then like, oh, hunky dory, everything's fine, nuclear family. Like,
Hmm.
so I, and I, by seeing different people comment about it in the groups, I think it's, some people are like, I had trauma and some people are like, I didn't. So even based on that, I would say like I'm not sure. That makes me like really unsure.
Yeah.
Um, but I also have heard like it could have been viral.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I hadn't
what
heard
is
about that.
That's very interesting to me because when my OCD flared up, it was after I had anesthesia for a surgery, and I came out of that like totally just so intense, like
Hmm.
and I had a massive episode where I didn't want to touch the floor. I felt like if one piece of clothes in the closet was dirty, all the clothes were, and I was taking them out and throwing them in the washing machine, like going berserk.
Hmm.
And like that was like a flare up that was very much tied to the anesthesia. And decades later, I had to have anesthesia again in 2017 for a surgery, and I was petrified, and I said to the doctor, I thought this sounded crazy. I was like, I'm petrified of anesthesia because it made me have like, psychological or
Yeah.
neurological event after. And he said, oh, that totally happens with young women that age. I was around, I think like 19
Wow.
years old. Yeah. And I was like, are you serious? Like that was just a theory of mine. And he's like, no, totally. And now my daughter, she's a medical assistant for an orthopedic surgeon, and she said, "Oh yeah, totally. That it's very dangerous anesthesia at that age, and maybe
Wow.
anesthesia is safer now." Yeah. So because of that, like just like loosely like tying it to misophonia, where it felt the same, the way it was so abruptly triggered, and the way that misophonia typically does show up in people at this age. Like, is it like the combination of if you have this certain gene and if you've had this certain virus, is is that the combination for when you turn this age, when your brain is developing at this stage, that
Hmm.
this will happen? So it does, I don't know, it does feel like it would make sense that it has some kind of like mechanical, history like that.
Yeah, a couple quick things about that is yeah, I hadn't heard like maybe a viral or a connection to anesthesia, but I had someone come on recently. I feel like I posted it, but she said yeah, it's been connected to she's around our age too, but it's been connected to her hormones her whole life, and that
Right.
was interesting because of obviously around 10 to 12, like there's a lot of hormone stuff going on, but she said approaching like around menopause, it's wreaked havoc on her misophonia as well. So she kind of
Uh,
keeps she kind of made that link there. I haven't heard really a lot of other people talk about that, but that kind of came to mind as you were talking about.
yeah. Well, what is
Uh,
that? Yeah. There's a
the other
term.
thing,
Yeah.
so, sorry, before because I know I'm going to forget,
Yeah.
but the other thing I was talking about, I was going to mention is, yeah, I mean, the way you were describing, like, so the term epigenetics, I think, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's about like, yeah, maybe a kind of genetic component, which then gets, it doesn't mean that 100% something will happen to you, but it could just basically mean that you're a little bit more susceptible as that the machinations of that gene turning into yourself happen as you're developing. Certain things in your environment could maybe accentuate um, uh, something that can actually make it a reality versus just staying dormant.
Right.
So maybe there is something there where that's kind of it's a combination of like nurture and nature.
Yeah.
That could be, the stars aligned in an unfortunate way, and
Yeah.
it kind of developed because you were kind of there was a marker maybe in your genetics or our
Right.
genetics.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, and especially seeing some of the families say, like, who knows what, goes on,
Yeah.
and trauma could be different for anybody. It could be, something that might seem benign, but the kid's traumatized. You don't know.
Yeah, well, that's that small T trauma that I've recently heard about. It doesn't have to be something like
Yeah. Yeah.
even if it's just like a lot of walking on eggshells. Which when you were talking about how things would be, crazy and then back to normal, like
Mm.
I don't know, I would be walking on eggshells maybe
Yeah.
in a situation like that, not wanting to flip back and forth.
True. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And, but since I did spend so much time delving into all that, like, I'm like, okay, I feel like I made peace with it all. So why is this still here? Like,
Yeah.
so that's why I am also like leaning away from the trauma thing, because the trauma reaction feels different than the
Hmm.
misophonia, you know?
hmm Yeah, no, and that's great. Yeah, I haven't talked to many people who are not therapists who have not, like you, kind of really thought about that aspect of it. So it's really interesting to get your take.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe talking about we didn't. I usually kind of sometimes hit upon like how things like in school and friends growing up, like social life. Did
Yeah.
it seep into any of that?
Um, yes and no. Like, I do remember in elementary school, having issues with certain kids and not understanding why. And this actually is before I was 10, before that like switch really got turned on. I do remember two kids in class that I couldn't sit near,
Hmm.
especially when it was like quiet and we were taking a test, and I would like cry to the teacher. I remember crying to her and be like, "Jody's doing that thing again." And the teacher being like, "She's not doing anything." And I'm like, that's another thing that like I had completely forgotten, and that came back in the
Hmm.
last 5 years. Like, I was like, oh my god, that was misophonia. um so I I do remember that. And then definitely in college, not realizing it was misophonia. Yeah, taking exams and like,
Oh yeah.
you can't take the exam because you were fixated on this chick across the room that's chewing gum. And
It's
I
probably Jody
definitely,
again.
yeah. And I totally remember giving this girl the evil eye. And like through this exam the whole time, I was just like going nuts. And then after the exam, she came up to me and she said, "Is there something wrong?" She was like this punk girl. She looked like really scary, but she was actually very sweet. And she was
Yeah.
like, she's like, "Do you have a problem with me?" She wasn't even saying it like threatening. And I was like, and I just told her, I go, "You know what? You were chewing gum really loud the whole exam and it was really distracting to me." And she said, "Oh my God, you should have said something." And I'll never forget that. I was like, "Oh, I didn't know you could be like a normal person and just like just ask people not to chew
Yeah.
gum." Um,
Yeah, we
but
definitely internalize a lot and go through scenarios that sometimes don't happen. Wouldn't
right,
happen that way.
yeah, like
Um,
oh my God, do people just? I don't know, but and
yeah.
then there's, you know, but as far as again taking stock of my life, I've never. I'm single. I've raised my daughter as a single mother, and I I've I've never been able to have like roommates back in my 20s. Like I knew immediately when I started college I need to live alone. I got my own dorm room, like things that were not normal. Like I see my daughter, she lived with 8 people and she had a blast. And now
Yeah.
she's like moving in with another friend and like those are normal
Yeah.
ways to be at that age. And I definitely made my life so I could have my comfort zone, as much as possible. And I've been, lucky enough that I've been able to do that. I've been able to live alone and um I just never knew like why I needed to.
Did it cross your mind that it was because of the sounds and or it was just so maybe deep in your personality to kind of always want to be alone that's kind of what you assumed
Yeah,
at
I
some
figured I
point.
was just a loner. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's definitely now like a part of the taking stock of like, you know, like I don't have a partner and I like how much of it is this condition and how much of it is like what I really want. Like I don't know. I can't separate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are
Gotcha.
days where it's like, it's hard being alone and it's like so you see the cost. And
Yeah.
whereas and then I can like, just convince myself, no, 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 it's like it's how I really like to be. Like I
Did
don't
it
know.
ever cause a conflict between you and like a non-family member, or
I never got
had you
that
the wall
far.
was up? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
because when I dated people, it's funny. One thing, even though I didn't know I had that this was a thing, I did just think I got irritated with people when I got close to them.
Oh, okay. Like emotionally close to them, you just
Yes.
thought, okay,
And
yeah,
so
yeah,
I think that definitely, was like an automatic like wall without even really thinking much about it. Even saying it now, I'm like, oh wow, that
yeah.
like I do remember always being afraid of living with somebody. I was
Because
just
yeah, that's the thing. Like it's like you're afraid of commitment, or that there's other
right,
labels that are kind of adjacent, but are not,
right,
not wanting to hear that
right,
person eat kind of thing. So
right,
I can see how you can kind of, or anyone can kind of associate it to something that's more quote unquote popular in terms of
right. Yeah, like and when I remember being like, okay, everyone grows up and gets married and has kids and live with somebody. And I remember never being able to picture that life. Like and and in the back of that was like I end up hating everybody. I don't want to hate like the person I
yeah,
have to live with.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And thinking it was, it's not hate, it's this condition.
Do you I mean, speaking of, do you I don't. I was almost going to ask you, do you hate people in general? But like, I don't. Do you look at people with that kind of like? Well, how we say kind of jokingly, I hate that person, whatever. But
Yeah.
I know, and we have these weird thoughts in our head, obviously, when we're getting triggered. But do you walk around kind of thinking, just kind of generally don't like people, I don't like that person, but I'll, you know, pretend
You
to?
know, I would say,
Because
um,
obviously you're not a hateful person, I could tell. But
right,
it's
exactly. I was gonna say, like, I think that's the cruelty of this condition
yeah,
is because I think I am a very social person. I think I would definitely be more of a an extrovert and a a people person, yeah, if I also didn't have this intolerance.
Mm-hmm,
And,
mm-hmm. Do you
that's,
sorry, go on.
I, maybe I shouldn't even say this, but I do see that there does seem to be two different types of misophoniacs, where,
Mm-hmm.
some people are just like, screw everybody and they have to deal with us, and then there's the people that are like, this is our problem, and it's understandable that people don't
Yeah,
understand. And
yeah,
I think I'm in the latter, like, I
yeah.
yeah.
I think that's how most people are. I mean, the former, it's not sustainable. I can understand where I think we've all been there, but for very brief periods. But it's not a sustainable approach, and it's probably not going to be a solution. We're
Yeah.
not going to expect everyone to be quiet
Right.
all the time. What about for work stuff? I don't know if we talked about kind of like how you've navigated
Oh,
working.
yeah, that's I have my own business. I take care of people's pets. It's something I started about 10 years ago. I never thought it would be my career, but it actually works for me so well. And I realized there, again, I subconsciously like made my life where I don't have to be around people. I don't have to be indoors. I don't have to. I have worked in offices that has been very difficult.
Yeah,
Um, Before that, I worked for an airline when I was in my early 20s, and that kind of environment is like okay because when you're in a big
white
space,
noise.
like
Yeah,
now, yeah. But the sitting in a quiet office, that was like
no,
not that was as bad as the exams in college. And I didn't realize it at the time. I was like, I hate this environment for many reasons, but um, I thought maybe my reactions were because I was so miserable in the job, like that it made me also
yeah.
like sensitive to everybody's noises and stuff. And can I say, I, this is like, I'm sure, you encounter this all the time. It's a very interesting thing having like an audio recording about misophonia, two misophoniacs, and like that are like, I realize my voice can be triggering to people and noises I'm making can be triggering. So, uh, that's like an unusual thing about, misophonia is that, you know, you, you might be a trigger yourself and you can be aware of that, like, but you just don't help
Right,
it.
right.
It's
Well, I find that I mean I've been to in-person misophonia conventions, and I find that in most cases, just the fact that you're talking to another person who understands kind of takes that your brain's threat radar away, and
yeah, maybe, yeah, because I realized a couple times like my voice went down at the end, that I call it mumblecore, but they call it like that vocal fry. And I'm like, oh my
mhm.
God, why am I doing that? And I can't tolerate it for a second if I hear it on like TikTok or something. And so I'm like, I apologize in advance to anybody.
Oh yeah, no worries. So, I mean, some people just have right on Reddit they don't like my voice, but it's pretty
Oh,
rare. But it totally understands. Like I don't get offended at all. I'm like,
yeah,
great.
you know,
Wait till the transcripts come out, and then
right, right.
so
Yeah, I guess if somebody
um,
needs to do that, they can do that.
well, yeah, we're getting. Oh, man, I think I can go on for a while, but I do have to get back to my my day job. But um, yeah, I don't know. This is amazing. Any kind of last kind of things you want to share with people? And we'll have another opportunity maybe before I post this. If you want to, I can um convey a message or whatever. But any like kind of last things you kind of want to share with the community?
Gosh, yeah,
Not to put you on the spot,
yeah.
But,
I mean, I guess just hang in and keep sharing
hmm, hmm.
their story, because it's legitimizing it, which is, I think, huge for a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of people suffer in silence. They don't have a support next to them, or even have like a daughter like you do who's an ally. So I
Yeah,
think sometimes is the next best thing, or at least can maybe start a conversation, because some people actually have sent these episodes to somebody in their life, and it can kind of, well, I've actually heard both sides. I've heard it work out well, but I've also heard it not work out well.
Well, that's
Not
on
to put a not to put a downer on it, but that's on the other person, I think. If
yeah. No, I definitely tried to do the same thing. But and I know when I was doing that, I was trying to, show my parents that I'm not the, difficult, miserable person they think I am. And so even if they can't hear it, I have to remind myself. That I think to me has been the biggest perception change, that I always looked at myself as trouble, basically. Like my mother's nickname for me was Trouble.
mm,
And now I think like, oh wow, like that's not who I really am. And I'm kind of like remembering this joyful kid I was, and that's the real me.
yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
let's end on that memory, because yeah, that's this is a beautiful story. Well, yeah, thanks Jennifer for coming on. This is great.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Thank you again, Jennifer. Once again, that was just surreal and emotional conversation for me, and yeah, I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks. If you like this episode, don't forget you can leave a quick review or hit the 5 stars wherever you listen to this podcast. You can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website at misophoniapodcast.com. You can reach me on Instagram or Facebook at Misophonia Podcast. Support the show by visiting Patreon at patreon.com/Misophonia Podcast. Theme music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.